Cakes and souffles, they rise best when they're left alone. The same goes for innovation. So my tip to leaders would be free up that zone. Just leave us alone. And instead of key performance indicators, please use other outcome metrics.
Hello, and welcome to the Future of University podcast series. My name is Todd Davey, Associate Partner at UIN and your host for today. Dive into our discussion with Farshida Zafar, Director of the Erasmus Centre for Entrepreneurship in the Netherlands. The discussion spans crucial topics, including the challenges of navigating organisational politics for successful innovation and valuable advice for university leaders to support innovation without hindering creativity. We hope you enjoy the discussion. Welcome everybody to today's chat with Farshida Zafar, the Director of the Erasmus Centre for Entrepreneurship at the Erasmus University in the Netherlands. She is the former Director of Erasmus X, which is quite an interesting endeavour that we'll dive into. Previously also the Learning Innovation Officer at the Erasmus School of Law, and she has a Master's degree of Law at the Erasmus University. And I'm sure that's not finally either. Given your background. But on that note, I would like to welcome Farshida to today's discussion. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Todd. Thank you for that introduction.
Going back to the early days when you're at the Erasmus School of Law and you got into emerging education technology, you developed the university's first blended learning undergraduate program as a part-time law program. I just wanted you to talk to us about the journey that you undertook and what you learned from that.
Oh, wow. That's a quite interesting question that you ask. What have I learned? I've learned how to say sorry a lot. I think the journey started with a formal request by the dean back in the day, and I just started my career at the Erasmus School of Law. And the request I got was that we had a part-time program for undergrads, but more specifically geared towards people who already have a career and were looking into re-education or maybe reskilling, upskilling, and getting a legal degree. So on an annual level, we would have around 17 students because these are people who already have a career, they have a job. It's a study they do part-time. And at that moment in 2012, we were looking at redesigning the full bachelor's in law curriculum, and the law faculty had chosen to shift their didactical format into problem-based learning. And of course, this program, which was geared towards part-time students, didn't fit in that picture. So the request I had was, can you actually phase this program out? Can you come up with an idea to phase it out? And then I said, what if I have a better plan and we can make it work? But naive as I was, I just started at the law faculty. I didn't look into the type of technology that was available. I didn't look into the digital infrastructure. I didn't look into the resources I had. I just kind of went with what I know, which was design thinking. And I thought, if I just empathize with these students, I can come up with a solution, which is what I did. We did some research, desk research. I had lots of interviews. And basically what I figured out during that whole journey was that the program as such was okay, but the problem was with the organization and the fact that you couldn't really expedite your journey here. And basically what I did then is, okay, so what if we combine this with technology? Let's see how that works. And then built a business case around it with the idea that if we could reach 30 students per year, we would have a fully viable program. And then it turned out that not 30 students enrolled, but 230. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was even without marketing, without communication around it. Because for me, this was like a test case, like, let's see how this goes. If it goes well, then we can scale, but let's test it out first. But yeah, my testing group became a larger group. And then without actually realizing it, we had a fully fledged blended learning program before blended learning became a thing, which actually helped the university as well in terms of getting to the state of where we were now focusing on building a digital infrastructure, because I was getting sick and tired of punching in student numbers in a back end to secure videos, etc. What I've learned is that it's okay to sometimes make mistakes, but you have to own it. What I've also learned is that the type of technology that you use is not even the biggest issue. The biggest issue is your organization ready? Is there enough capacity? Is there enough thoughtfulness in how to deal with these new technologies? But also, how do you create win-win for everyone? And that's something I've learned, and also saying sorry a lot.
It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission sometimes
Oh
in
yeah.
universities. I was really impressed with the step that you took, because this is not something that your standard professor would do, which is as soon as there's a problem, go and talk and interview the current students, but also potential students, and find out what they want and then reconstruct it in that way, because that's quite a challenging exercise for many professors and also for universities generally. And I guess that leads into a question that I wanted to ask, because I was interested to read a comment that you made about innovators in higher education needing to understand the politics of your organisation to be able to innovate. And I was wanting you to elaborate on that, because that's also been my experience, and I think it's really underestimated.
Yeah, I think it comes down to organizational sensitivity and understanding that politics is all around us. Where people come together, it's about politics. Everybody has conflicting interests. Everybody wants something. You also want something, right? And I think when it comes down to politics is to understand how can you actually create win for everyone. And it's very important, because at the end of the day, it's not the technology that makes it work. It's the people behind the technology that make it work. Yes, I have a legal degree, but I'm also a tech geek. And for me, it's always been about solving a problem from a human-centered perspective and not so much from a product-centered perspective. So understanding that you have to deal with people, regardless of the type of technology that you use, will help you a long way within any organization. Because at the end of the day, it's about building relationships that are long lasting. And it's about your performance as well that builds the trust in these relationships, right? So to me, politics means using or being able to understand what others need and want, understand really clearly what you need and want, and to find a way to influence others to get on board with whatever type of vision or narrative you're trying to build. And in my experience, and I've done a lot of crazy projects at the university, from building applications to virtual reality courtrooms, to streaming platforms for literature, to fully fledged blended programs. I don't think I would have been able to do any of these programs if, one, I didn't have the relationships within the university that I've built and invested a lot of time and energy into, and two, if my performance sucked. Because I think you build a reputation, people will start believing in you and start to understand that when you say I'm going to do it, then you'll do it. When you go the extra mile, and that builds up the relationships, because that's how you build the trust as well. And understanding what other people want in your organization, or what type of trends and development they're dealing with, and how you can leverage that's all politics. There's zero technology involved. It's about understanding people. And I think that is one thing that a lot of innovators tend to forget.
I think it's something that's really important to mention, because when you talk with lecturers, professors, etc., most of them would be thinking it's about the content, the quality of the content, maybe even the pedagogies, but actually getting buy-in within the organisation politically and getting others on board can be extremely important. Now, you mentioned crazy things, and I think that takes us into your time as director of Erasmus X, called a Radical Innovation Unit at the Erasmus University at Rotterdam. What were you trying to achieve with this unit?
First of all, I was trying to get the university to actually have innovation in their strategy. Because I think when we're looking at innovation, and when we look at, what we want to do with tech or with people or with anything in general, I think one of the things that we always forget, and this is something that comes up every single time, is that people always tell me, yeah, but it has to be a top-down decision. And from research, we know that top-down decisions don't always work. When you look at the other type of research, when you look into organizational change, it's about, movements have to start bottom up. But we know that doesn't work either, because the moment the money is gone, your project is dead. It's as simple as that. So through my experience, I've noticed that once you have innovation in your strategy and you actually orchestrate that innovation. So it's not just about, oh, let's do something cool. No, it's about actually getting everybody on board, having innovation mentioned in your strategy, having a clear perspective on how to embed the innovations on the long run, because that's the trickiest part, is how do you embed it institutionally? That can only come if you have innovation in your strategy. If it's not there, it's not going to work. So for me, my main objective when I started Erasmus X was to have the university take innovation seriously and not see it as a hobby or a side job or something you could do in that 0.2 FTE you have free in the week.
So a disruptive unit is what you wanted.
Exactly. And the way I had envisioned it was to have a autonomous vehicle or lab or hub, you give it a name, where you could actually experiment with new types of technology, connected back to research, connected back to education. And instead of having it very heavy on the professor side, let's include a lot of students in there so that we have a student-centered perspective on how to deal with this. So I think that's what I was trying to achieve. And in general, I think, yeah, if I'm very honest with myself, I think it worked because it's still there. So I think it was really cool to actually have this unit, have a team, because I started out with 2 people. And when I left, there was 25.
Fantastic.
Yeah, started small, scaled really fast, made it too big to fail. And then there you And I think the most important part for me in that journey was to understand that after a certain amount of time, I also needed to make space for someone else. Because when it comes to innovation, I think a lot of us who are in this field, who are trying to innovate, who are being entrepreneurs and not entrepreneurs, we tend to get into a specific role and then we forget that we are also just humans and we get into our own comfort zone. So for me, it was very important, and this is also something that I clearly communicated when I started Erasmus X, that I would do it for a maximum of 3 years. And after 3 years, someone else had to take my position and then bring it further, because you need a crazy person to kickstart it, and then you need a sane person to embed it still. So, so knowing yourself and knowing your role in that is just as important as having a clear vision on where you want to go. And I think today it took me 6 months to actually sit down with my successor and manage my way of thinking and transfer that into her, but also telling her that it's my baby, but now it's your stepchild. So good luck with it. Just don't ruin it.
I guess one of the things I wanted to pick up as part of that was you previously made an analogy about gaming being like education. And
Yeah.
I wanted you to explain that a little bit, why you think that is and how can universities use this perspective?
Yeah, I think everything in university is a game. I'm a gamer myself. And if you look at university, our educational levels, your bachelor 1 year, your second year, your third year, these are all levels. And then you have all these challenges, write a thesis, do this assignment, here's a test. These are just challenges in every game, right? And then at the end of your master's, you have the end boss, which is your thesis. So it's just a game. And for me, if you perceive university as a game, why not have cheat rules? Why not? And I think when you look at how games are designed and how they're really tried and tested on players to see, what kind of emotions they evoke, what kind of state of mind it evokes, those things that at universities we could really learn from. And also allow your students some cheat codes. Come on, that's the epitome of creativity, is to take a shortcut and still get the same result. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that, having a law degree.
I think a certain chat device is coming to mind right now.
If you look at it now, you have ChatGPT and all institutions and universities are freaking out. And I'm like, why are you freaking out? The version that we're working with is not even their best version. So if you're freaking out about this and the next wave of generative AI is going to hit you, you might as well just close your university if you're going to freak out. but you can also use it in your advantage. So for example, if you're teaching entrepreneurship, the way I would use it is to tell students, okay, I want you to go to ChatGPT and put in a prompt as into, I want you to look at social entrepreneurship. Give me your best ideas, your 10 best ideas on social entrepreneurship. And then from there, have a critical discussion and analysis on would this work, would this not work? And why would you force your students to fill in a business model canvas if ChatGPT can do it too? But the idea is not to not use these tools. The idea is to use these tools and have a really critical lens on what is true, what is not true, what is viable, what is not viable, what is desirable, what is feasible, and what is not. So I don't understand why universities are freaking out. You can use these tools to actually force your students to become more critical thinkers. But then, no, we'd rather freak out.
No, some fantastic insights. I guess I wondered if that fed into your concept of future-proofing education. Is that part of what you refer to in future-proofing education, or is it something you can explain about that would really resonate with our listeners?
In general, I don't think universities are built for change, right? Universities are built for resiliency. Look at where we are. The first European university was set up in 1100 something in Bologna. So we're still here. So universities are not built to change overnight. They're built to stand the test of time. But at the same time, I think now with the exponential growth of technology, with all the demographic developments, look at a lot of the other countries around us, a lot of the other continents, our population is graying. So there's a huge amount of trends and developments that are affecting the way we look at issues, at problems, at challenges. Yet we still maintain the same systems that we built in 1100. So maybe instead of saying the system is broken and we need to get rid of it, maybe we just need to have a better understanding of how we can change the system so the universities can still be here in the year 3000. And with that, with future-proofing education, I don't mean change your didactics or change what you're teaching, because the way we learn, our brain and our cognition hasn't changed at all. But what has changed is the type of tools we're using. What has changed is the labor market needs. What has changed is the possibilities we have with technology right now. So instead of seeing all this new tech as a real threat, let's see it as an opportunity, right? So then if we change the perspective of we need to educate students so they can have a degree, how about we change the perspective of we need to educate our students so they become resilient and critical thinkers so they don't make the same stupid mistakes as we did, right? It's a different perspective. And I'm not saying, because this is one of the things I've heard a lot within the legal industry, is that even in the future, you need lawyers. I'm not saying we don't need lawyers, but I'm saying we need lawyers who have a different set of skills. And those skills right now are not being taught, which is, to me, weird because everything around us is changing, but we're still doing the same thing. So we need to tweak it. And tweaking education is one of the hardest things there is because it's come so much with in our cultural context, in our organizational context. It's not easy to say, here you have a university that's over 100 years old and then tomorrow we'll do it differently. No, but you can still introduce technology into your classroom and look at your students from a different angle and try to teach them things that they cannot find on YouTube. Honestly, if I would be studying right now, I would have a blast. I would have my PhD in a year because I would use ChatGPT and all the other AI tools I can find.
Some tips for PhD students
there. Maybe.
Our members and listeners are quite diversified in terms of their roles. And so I wanted to ask you a two-part question. I really appreciated what you were describing there, but I really liked the example you gave earlier. So I wanted to do the same exercise. We have leaders of higher education within our membership group, and we also have educators. So I'm wondering if you could give maybe one tip how to future-proof your educational programs, one to leaders of higher education and also one to an educator type level.
So I think I'll start with the educators first. My tip to educators would be try to have an open mind. and also try to be critical as well. If I look at educators, and a lot of people in my network are professors, are teachers, are educators. In general, I feel in the West, we do not appreciate our educators as much as we should. Because in essence, these are the people that are educating the future generations who are supposed to take care of us when we're too old to work. But having said that, I also feel like that educators are too much ingrained in their same flow every day in, every day out, but maybe also put that critical lens on yourself. What is it that you would like to get out of teaching and educating young generations? And how can you do that differently? And I'm not saying that efficiency is key, because I think inefficiency is sometimes even better. It's like cooking, right? When you cook, it's inefficient because it takes up a lot of your time, but you're nurturing your soul and you're taking care of yourself. I feel the same way about education. It's actually expanding people's horizons, opening up new perspectives. Now, if you can do that by using technology, then just go ahead and do it. Don't be afraid if it fails. Don't be afraid if you don't get the immediate outcomes that you're looking for. Introducing new technology takes some time. Also, do not forget that you have to unlearn students a lot of things because they've been in this educational system for years on end. So yeah, if you stop working with a textbook, they're going to freak out. But then you have to be honest about it. To give you a really clear example on that, I was teaching a course called Living Law Lab, and it was a course around law and technology, because tech is my thing and law is my other thing. Let's bring it together and they can have a baby. The idea was to allow my students to have a choice on what type of technological experiment they wanted to investigate. And the objective of the course was find a piece of technology. It could be anything. It can be embryo selection, it can be CRISPR, it can be drones, it can be whatever. And then, do a legal analysis and see where it conflicts, and then solve it. Try to resolve the conflict without going back to legislation, because legislation takes time. Technology doesn't take that much time. And then my students, because they were left with the choice of finding their own file or their own technology, they freaked out because they were like, yeah, but where's the textbook? There is no textbook. But then what am I supposed to learn for my test? There is no test. So they had to unlearn what they had learned before, which is this is your roster, this is your examination rules, da, da, da. But if you, as an educator, are patient, and if you communicate that very well, your students will actually go along. Now, my students, by week 5, they would completely freak out, and I'd have some really nasty emails. But by week 8, they would know, and they're like, oh, so this is what she's trying to do. And at week 10, they'd be perfectly fine with it. So my tip to educators, try it out. Be clear in what you're trying to achieve. Also communicate that to your students. Don't be afraid to fail. My tip to leaders, do not qualify innovation as a hobby. It's not a hobby. It's an actual job. It's a very demanding job. And it's very frustrating for innovators to hear, have you reached your KPIs? Really? The best way to kill innovation is to come up with key performance indicators. If I launch 10 projects that are quite innovative and they're radical and they're not really something incremental, they're way on the spectrum of strategic, radical innovations, I don't even know if I'll keep all 10. I might pull the plug on projects 1 to 9, and only the 10th will be viable. But if you, as a leader, demand KPIs and you tell me you have to launch 10 projects or otherwise your innovation has failed, then you're already forcing me back into the system. So my tip to leaders would be free up that zone. Cakes and souffles, they rise best when they're left alone. The same goes for innovation. Just leave us alone. And instead of key performance indicators, please use other outcome metrics. You can look into key value indicators. What kind of value are you creating? You can look into outcomes on the long run, but do not block everything by sticking to what you know, which is KPIs. The other tip would be with innovation, if you have a radical group like Erasmus X, we had a very iterative process. And it was a very rapid iterative process as well, which meant that if by session 3, if we didn't have a clear objective or our research didn't really lead to anything concrete, we would just pull the plug. Killing your darlings is not a bad thing. But sometimes, because you're in a university system, you had to, at the beginning of the year, already budget for the entire year. For example, when COVID hit us, I had a question from one of the departments, and they had a program which was an outreach program to new students, and usually it would be on campus, but now, of course, everything was closed. So the idea was to build an application, and already had an application that we could quickly turn into white label and then use it for that specific program. But because of the timeline, and the timeline was very strict, it was just a couple of weeks, I went on a reconnaissance and looked for other solutions. Now, the budget people wanted me to budget for this program already the moment it hit us. So I budgeted for around 80K because that's how much it costs to build an application, even if it's white label. But then the new solution I found was 7,500 euros. So there's a huge gap. Now, from a business perspective, being an entrepreneur myself, I would say I would like 10 more of these projects, please, because apparently you're doing something very cost efficient and it's very effective. University perspective, you didn't spend your budget. We have to cut down. Like, it just blew my mind. Okay, university leaders, try to do something with your corporate finance and planning, because innovation requires a different type of budgeting as well. It's not just about, okay, here's your budget for this year. No, you really have to look at it from a business angle and then decide how much is this worth to me. Be my tip for university leaders.
I think some great tips in there, and I think I'd like to add one in myself, which is that university leaders can support those innovators, because inevitably there's going to be some failures along the way, and at times they might need to jump in and show some support.
Absolutely, 100% agree on that.
It brings me to my last question. Knowing your technology background, and you said you're a tech geek, let's take a leap into the future. Let's see if we can imagine 2040 at a university and the role that technology might be playing. Could you imagine that for us?
Oh,
difficult
wow.
question. It's a difficult question, I know, but maybe just taking a leap. Maybe you've got a specific example you can think of.
I feel this is a little bit tricky because I remember reading an interview with Peter Drucker, I think in the 1990s in Forbes, where he said that online education would disrupt universities and then universities would become redundant. And I think that's been like the backbone of every MOOC platform ever since. We're going to disrupt university. So I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. I think in the future, I think the difference between research universities and the universities of applied science will become way more evident. I think it's inevitable to still have a campus life, because I still feel, even with all the tech that is out there, your student time is more than just about studying, right? It's about forming the basic networks for the rest of your life, building relationships, finding friends, getting into adolescence and understanding who you are. So I think in that sense, universities will always play a role. I do think that when it comes to the technological side of things, what I hope is that a lot of our systems will be more AI driven. For example, one of the things that I would like to see is that students, they have their personal AI tutor in a way, where you as a student, once you start with your university adventure, you can actually fill in your preferences in terms of what kind of career would I like, what kind of ambitions do I have, what do I like to watch, et cetera, et cetera. So your AI builds a profile for you and then gives you an automated curriculum in terms of, okay, so you want to be a tech geek and with a law degree, then for your law degree, you need these courses to do there. For your tech degree, you need these courses to do there. And for your skilling, because it's not just about reading the books and applying the theory, but you also need to understand how to apply it in practice. For your skills building, et cetera, recommend this and this and this. So I think that would be really cool. I also think that would really help certain students who don't know what they want, because there's a lot of law students that go to law school without actually wanting to become a lawyer, but they don't know what else to do, so they go to law school. The same, I think the same goes for business.
Certainly.
Right? But I think these type of systems would actually help. In addition, it would be really nice if there was a bit more focus on creating immersive worlds where students can actually apply some of these things. And I'm not talking about the metaverse, because the metaverse is really not interesting. As long as you have to wear stupid goggles and be in a fictional world, it doesn't make sense. At least not to me. And I've seen many attempts of building a metaverse, but I think it becomes more interesting where I'm old, but back in my day, like around 10 years ago, we had something called the Google Glass, and it was less invasive. But if we could take a system like that, where you could actually, if you're studying history, picture yourself being in the Roman Empire all of a sudden, now that would be amazing. But again, universities aren't built for change. So I'm not confident that we will be in that stage using technology in that way.
I think that's a fantastic way to end today's fireside chat, a fantastic insight into your mind. And if you're old, then I'm older. But I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you again, Farshida, for such a fabulous insight into future-proofing education.
And thank you, Todd. Thank you, UIN, and see you soon.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion. Follow UIN on LinkedIn, and if you're enjoying our podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review in your podcast platform of choice to help other people find this content too.